So I'm a newsman, but I'm also the father of 7 kids, including 2 daughters. And some days it's easier than others to separate those 2 roles. And one day that it was very difficult to separate those roles was when we were breaking the story of Bowen Turner. Bowen Turner is a fortunate son from Orangeburg County, South Carolina. He was accused of raping 3 different women over the period of a little over a year, back in 2018 and 2019. And you've probably heard this story, you've heard this name, you've seen the headlines, you've clicked on a few articles, but we felt from the beginning that this was bigger, that this went deeper, that this wasn't just about one person or 3 victims, that it was about a system that re-victimized not just these 3 women, but dozens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of others like them, and in turn, their families, the communities. That's bigger than a click. That's bigger than a story. So we dug deeper. We wanted to hear from them. We wanted to hear from the advocates and the attorneys who are fighting for them. We wanted to hear from the leaders who are tasked with making something of this. And so that's what we wanted to tell. That's the truth we wanted to find in this. So again, if you just clicked once or twice on Bowen Turner or one of the stories, we would invite you to join us in digging deeper, in hearing the real story behind the headlines. And so we're going to start our story by hearing from Chloe Bess.
I was with like a group of people, and I have a twin brother. He was with me, and then my best friend at the time, she was with me. And they left to go get food, and there was a miscommunication. I was supposed to go with them, and I ran inside to use the bathroom before we left, and she ended up leaving without me on accident. But it was fine because I still felt safe there. They were going to be back in an hour or so, whatever it was. So I'm just hanging out, and some time goes by, so I step outside to give her a phone call and be like, hey, where are you at? Because she was also driving my car. All my stuff was in there, and we were supposed to be staying at this particular house that night. So I just wanted to make sure she was safe and coming back so we could, be together. And as I'm making this phone call, Bowen walks out, and I kind of start to feel uncomfortable. But he lived down the street from me. My dad's a pastor, and his family attended our church. So he was familiar to me. I thought it was weird because we weren't close friends or anything. So I was, thinking to myself, like, why is he coming out here? It's kind of, I explain to people when I tell this story, it's like you're watching a movie and then you fast forward 15 minutes and it's a completely different part. That's kind of how this night looks for me in my mind. It's like I'm watching this scene and then I fast forward and it jump cuts to a completely different scene. And so I've, over the years tried to put pieces together of maybe what could have happened or led up to that moment. But so I remember him coming out, and then I was asking my friend to come pick me up, or when she was coming back, I was trying to leave per se. And he's like, please don't leave, like stay. And I'm looking at him, like, I'm very transparent, and I was looking at him like, what are you talking about? And so the phone conversation ends, and then I just remember him pulling me into like a tree line. There was a truck parked there, and we go behind the truck. The next thing I know, I'm on the ground, and he's a lot bigger than me. I only weigh like 115 pounds. I'm really tiny. And so there was not much I could do at that moment in time. So I remember that, and then just being on the ground. And like I said in a different interview, I remember looking at the stars. That was like the main point, and I could, feel what was happening. I was aware of what was going on, and I was just petrified. I was frozen. I couldn't move. I wanted to kick and scream, but I just couldn't move. I didn't know what to do. And so at that point, I'm looking at the stars, and I'm just like, okay, like, I just hope it's at least, quick so I can just get up and run away. And so after that, I run away. And I remember I ended up in the bathroom, and I was looking at myself in the mirror, and I mean, my hair was all crazy. There were leaves and twigs in my hair. My shirt was askew. It was like I wasn't even looking at myself. It was very weird. And then that's when I peeked out the door. I thought he was asleep on the couch. So I took that as an opportunity to run out of the house. I hid behind a bush, pulled my phone out. It's all cracked and shattered at this point. It's on 1% as well. So I just clicked the first person that my phone opened up to. He was one of my good guy friends at the time. I called him and he answers. I don't even know how he understood what I was saying because I was so hysterical, but all I said was Bowen's name and he knew. And he was like, I'm on the way, like I'm coming to get you. And at this point, Bowen now walks out of the house and is like screaming my name. So if you can imagine the terror of me just hiding behind this bush as, he's screaming my name. I'm aware of what just happened and I don't even know what to make of it. And now I'm just waiting for my friend to come get me. So he gets in a truck and is now driving around trying to find me, screaming my name out the window, all of this stuff. So I make my way up the driveway because it's on some property. And my friend told me he was about to pull in. So I make my way up the driveway. I see his car, we get in, and that was kind of that. I, felt safe in that moment once I got in that car. And then, the ball started rolling from there. So.
Wow. So Chloe's courageously shared her story, not just with us, but on the steps of the South Carolina State House in front of a whole bank of television cameras. But not all of the victims in this case were able to speak, to share their stories. In fact, one of those victims, Dallas Staller, tragically took her own life last fall. Dallas has had to rely on her family, and in particular her sister, BRETTE, to tell her story.
I remember getting the phone call one evening from my parents, and they said, Dallas is hurt. And I'm like, I immediately, I'm like, oh, okay, she's in a car, she got in a car accident. Oh my God, is she okay? And they said, no, she's been raped. And I was just shocked. That was definitely not what I was thinking that was going to come out of anybody's mouth ever. So Dallas was like friends with everybody. We went to a really small private school, very cliquey, very political, just very monetarily driven. But she was friends with everybody. She was her senior class president. She was the yearbook editor. She was very active in all of the social clubs. She was very active in volleyball, and she was even on a travel volleyball team. So Dallas was struggling, obviously, after the assault. She was having to go to school with him for like weeks until the school board decided what they were going to do, if they were going to expel him or whatever they're going to do. Mind you, his father, Walt Turner, was on the school board. So that's, there's some politics there. With that being said, she was getting, naturally, imagine being in the halls of school, being in the classroom with the person who assaulted you. You're also in a school full of people, that have taken sides. The kids, they started a hashtag on social media, a hashtag Free Bowen. And she's at school with the guy. And you've got, certain teachers that are not directly saying things to her or about her, but, wanting to know, well, why does she have to go do her class, in the principal's office? Why can't she just be normal? It's not that big of a deal, or kids making comments in classrooms. Specifically, there was a person in the classroom who had said, they made a comment about rape, and then they said, well, it takes two to tango. And the teacher in that classroom did absolutely nothing about it. And Dallas is just sitting there horrified. So just the lack from the school of doing anything about the bullying, and then the bullying itself. That's a huge, she's 17 years old. I mean, I can't imagine that. Like, so they're extremely, just beat her down. I called my parents and I talked to them and I said, hey, why doesn't Dallas come up and visit me for Christmas break? I'll take her to New York, we'll do the whole 9, we'll just be normal, we'll do normal stuff. So this is the first time she came to visit, and this was the first time that that I've seen her since this incident happened. So she gets to my house, everything's fine. I don't talk about it. I definitely back up. We're going to be normal. It was not normal. She was very, very distraught. She was putting on a very good front. We would do things to, have fun. We go shopping, we go out to eat, we do this and that. I would try to mention and bring it up just because I wanted to know, if she would talk to me, and she definitely didn't want to talk to me and tell me exactly what happened. So I knew that she was having nightmares. She told me that she was feeling sick and that she wasn't able to sleep because she was just having these debilitating nightmares. So one of the things that a cousin of mine who lived there and I thought would be a good idea, we said, let's go to this self-defense class at this karate studio. Let's do that. That would be so fun. A little bit on the fence, but she went and we did it. And they were amazing. They were so helpful. And she was happy. You see that smile on her face. She was getting I could see a little bit of what was before. But unfortunately, throughout the trip, and it was right before Christmas, and she just wasn't doing well. She was getting sick and she just couldn't sleep. And I would basically call my parents and I was, she's like, I think she needs to go home. I don't know what to do. So that was kind of the start of the downfall. So time goes on, Dallas graduates high school. They did end up, he left the school. I'm not quite sure if they asked him to leave or if his parents took him out. I really don't know. But she graduated. And one of the things was when she was looking at colleges, and Dallas was super smart. She was top in her class. She was very much the opposite of me. I was not a student, but she was looking at schools, and I was really pushing. I'm like, hey, go out of state. One of the schools she got into was Alabama. And I was like, that's awesome. Go to Alabama. And Dallas loved Charleston. And coming from this area and coming from a small town, a lot of the students stay in the state. They stay at these schools. And that's what she wanted to do. So I'm like, okay, great. Unfortunately, she gets there and it's immediately, one of the girls that she went to school with that was really good friends with Bowen, and who was one of the main free Bowen people, ended up being on her hall in her dorm. And this person was told to, take pictures of Dallas doing anything wrong, or, this is a college, freshman in college going, it's awesome. She's supposed to be having fun and meeting people and going out and getting the college experience. And that was completely ruined, within the first week, because this girl is telling people about her and tormenting her. And basically she knows that she's watching her, and they've put this girl in charge of, basically trying to expose her if she was going to underage drink or do anything that a normal college student would be doing. So just immediately that started. And then it started with, my father said, the stomach issues. She had to, go to the hospital a couple of times, and then eventually finding out that it, like he said, stress-induced anxiety naturally, because all of this is going on. Meanwhile, at home, it's just continuing. And it was trickling down to my younger sister, because she was still in the school. So she ended up going, she did 2 semesters at College of Charleston, and she ended up going home there in summer, and she moved to University of South Carolina in Beaufort, which was great. One of her very best friends from high school went to school there, and she honestly seemed like she was doing so much better. You know, she was still getting a little help. I know when she would come up to visit, she would show me like the new meditation app she was doing. And I was so proud because she used to make fun of me or say like, oh, you guys are, with your organic food and you're meditating. But, we used to give each other a little bit of flack, but she was starting to do all that. And one of the things I noticed was on her phone, like she would have like inspirational quotes on her screensaver, or just like very positive. She was really trying. But again, Dallas was really good at like putting on that front to cover up all that pain. And I think she really did it extra around me. One of like my favorite things, and that hurts me the most, that last summer I took my husband and my kids down and we went to Bluffton for a week. And she was working in the area, but she didn't have school or anything like that. So she stayed with us. And we were just at a house on the water, and we just had such a good time for the whole week. And we're like, we're going to do this every year. Like, this is going to be our thing. We're going to go down to Bluffton for a week, bring the kids. We took them out on the boat. We went to the sandbar, and she's hanging out with, my kids are really young. So, they're hanging out with Aunt Dallas. And that one of my favorite things, I have all the pictures from that weekend. Because that would have been the last weekend she saw my kids. So Dallas was another thing that we had planned while we were down there. We're like, okay, you're turning 21. I'm going to turn 30 this year. Like, we're going to do it big. We're going to go somewhere. We're going to do something fun. And we were talking about, okay, I'm going to take you to New York, because I wanted to take her. I'm a big city person, and I'm right outside the city. So I'm like, all right, we're going to New York, and we're going to do it right. COVID's a little bit of a problem, but we'll figure it out. Unfortunately, we didn't get to do that. I get a phone call on November 14th, the day before my dad's birthday. It was a Sunday. And I get the phone call. My cousin, who had just gotten married, she keeps calling my phone. And I'm like, we're there with our friends, we're watching the Eagles game. And I'm like, all right, she just wants to come up there with her husband. I'll call her later. She texts me. She said, I need you to call me immediately. And I'm like, oh my God, my dad, something's wrong with my dad. And so I get up, I call her, and she says, I need you to sit down. Is Kayvon home? And I'm like, no. I'm like, nope, I'm not. I just started screaming no, basically. And this is the really hard part for me to talk about, but I do want to talk about it because I want people to know how awful that this was for us. I was like, it's my dad. It's dad. He's dead. It's my dad. And she's like, no, it's Dallas. And I just dropped to the floor. I'm sorry. And I just screamed for what felt like hours, just like screaming no, just scream. I was just saying no. I don't know why I was screaming no constantly. And, they told me what had happened, and I'm just sitting there. Thank God my friends were there watching as they took the kids downstairs. They took the kids in the playroom. They turned the music up really loud, and my husband and his brother picking me up off the floor, and they're trying to take me upstairs so that nobody hear. I'm running outside screaming. They're just trying to calm me down. So, and I haven't talked to my parents at this point. So I am sitting in my closet, just screaming and crying. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, what? I was like, I don't understand. Everything was fine. I just saw you. I was mad. I was all of it. Why didn't you call me? What's going on? Very confused. And then just all of a sudden, just filled with anger. And then I just kind of was frozen for the next 16 hours until my family, my mother-in-law booked my plane ticket, and they came over first thing in the morning, and my husband and I were on a plane, and we got down there.
What a terrible case. What a travesty of justice. What a privileged, white, well-heeled person going through the system and having favors done for them. And none of those people would say, well, I did a favor for him. It's just done. Young man, criminal sexual conduct, accused, brought charges. While he's on bond, he commits another crime, another criminal sexual conduct, first water. Then we have a third one. And all of a sudden we go way past his bond violations, straight to a plea. And the plea was such a sweetheart deal. I mean, there again, makes it sound like a bar brawl. Makes it sound like he just had a little scrap in a drunken bout. He's given YOA, which only carries 6 years. Anyway, they had to plea it down to assault and battery in order to get him into the YOA program, because they're not supposed to put violent offenses in YOA. And that's the Youthful Offender Act, for those who don't know that. Then, where you're going to be on 5 years of probation, and you won't have to go on the sex offender registry. And that YOA, not even being class nonviolent, allows him to get an expungement. So he won't be known. Well, I've never known a rapist that raped one time. I've never known somebody that at age 25 gets up and says, I think I'm going to be a rapist today. We're raising them. We're coddling them through the juvenile system. And there's all this legislation from Senator Malloy and others, and Hutto, of let's change, the judicial system so that people don't have to pay to go into the system. The state has to absorb that. All of these things in Senate 53 are just ridiculous. But there's a movement nationally, afoot to do that. And speaking of the national movement, it's creeping into South Carolina of, well, people shouldn't have to pay bond. Oh, they poor things. They can't do that. Let's just put them on GPS, which is a joke. The Turner case, a perfect example of what a joke it is. When he had on, ankle, he violated. And I don't care how many times you go before a judge, and this is statewide, even in Lexington County. If you say, well, I saw him at such and such a bar. Well, did you tell a law enforcement officer? Did you get a warrant? Well, that's not really a violation, Miss Hudson, and we're not going to put him in jail. Undoubtedly, Mr. Turner has decided that nobody has the right to tell him about anything to do. And then we want him to go back to his parents. What? Who've allowed him to act like this and have hired an attorney, and we want him to be in a home where all this took place in the first place. That don't make any sense at all.
This is the worst case scenario as a father, other than what the Stollers have had to deal with in losing a child. As a father, the attack and the rape of your daughter is like the worst case scenario, right? That's just the worst thing ever. And so I was hoping that the system would bring justice to bear on a very unjust situation. However, the system just continued to re-victimize Chloe time and time again. We've talked about it. She was slut-shamed by a sitting South Carolina state senator. She was made to feel insignificant by a state solicitor. And she and we were lied to by investigators and others as to the consequences that would be enforced should the accused rapist bond be violated. And that happened over 50 times in a 45-day period, and yet nothing happened. The judge wouldn't even hear the motion. And so I think citizens of South Carolina should be concerned for their safety. It seems that politics takes front seat to victims' rights. The injustice system, as you said the other day, the corruption, the nepotism, they stand in the way, I think, of ultimately keeping the citizens of South Carolina safe. And I guess if I've learned anything, it's when I witness powerful people bargain with those who desire power well, the masses end up losing power. I said it in the courtroom and I'll say it today. When the elephants in the room fornicate, the mice get stepped on. And that's what we have witnessed over the last 3 years. And I think we're just tired of being stepped on, to be honest with you.
So you heard in that segment, victims advocate Laura Hudson talk about reoffending. That ended up being important in this story because not long after we interviewed the victims and the advocates in this case, Bowen Turner, in fact, did just that and attempted to do far worse, it appears. On Mother's Day, 2022, Turner went to a bar in Orangeburg, South Carolina, bought alcohol underage, allegedly, drank to excess underage, allegedly, and was attempting to get a female employee at the bar to go home with him. Luckily, those who worked at this establishment prevented that from happening and forced Turner to leave the bar, according to police reports. He was later found walking down the street, the middle of the road in Orangeburg, and upon being arrested, lied about what he'd been doing, according to the police report, was transported to the detention center where threatened to bite an officer's finger off, called another correctional officer a bitch. Yeah, that's who we're dealing with here, people. But the advocates were right. Bowen Turner was let loose by the system, put in a position to reoffend, almost did, which leads us to a court hearing in Orangeburg, South Carolina in July of 2022. So when you look at the level of insider deals and back scratching, cozy cronyism, it's rare in South Carolina that you walk into a courtroom and expect the right thing to happen, because it almost never happens. But in the Bowen Turner case, we finally got there. We finally got there. July of this year, 2022, our news team traveled down to Orangeburg for a probation revocation hearing in front of Judge Roger M. Young, Sr. And the outcome here was a foregone conclusion. Bowen Turner's probation was revoked. He admitted he violated the terms of that probation with the Mother's Day drunken incident. But again, when you listen to these victims, when you listen to these advocates, when you listen to this case, how did it have to come to this? Why did it have to come to that? Yeah. The system didn't do its job. The system failed at every level. It was only the fact that Bowen Turner couldn't keep his own nose clean that landed him where he should have been from the beginning. And that's the real injustice here, people. It's not just the injustices done to these victims. It's the injustice done to all of us by a system that refuses at every level, in almost every case, to simply do the right thing. Justice is supposed to be blind, people, because it's supposed to be fair. But in South Carolina, its eyes are wide open, and it's looking for the powerful lawyer. It's looking for the well-heeled defendant. It's looking for the payoff, whether that means a judge preserving their power, a prosecutor preserving their position. Enough's enough. And if you watch this story and you think this system isn't in desperate need of being burned to the ground, I don't know what to say to you, because your eyes aren't open in that case.